Protests are taking place near the governor's residence. The crowd chants slogans, and the police attempt to intimidate them. Meanwhile, inside, the security team tries to hide the governor. The sound of breaking glass is heard. To protect the official, they lead him into an office. The crowd starts throwing Molotov cocktails at the building, leading to clashes with the police. Gunshots ring out. The governor, terrified, hides under the desk. Tear gas begins to seep into the office. The sounds of struggle are clearly audible from outside. The governor barricades the desk with chairs. The door opens, and he is found by a person wearing a gas mask, the Awakener. Special military unit fighters gear up for the operation. They head to the governor's house. Meanwhile, the governor calmly brews himself a cup of coffee and reads the newspaper. The article discusses hundreds of thousands of patients waiting for surgeries in public hospitals, but the governor avoids this topic. The fighters present a warrant to the guard at the gate and calmly drive onto the property. The governor watches them while sipping his coffee. Even as the unit begins their search, he remains unfazed and offers the fighters coffee. The governor stays calm even when taken to the police station, politely greeting other officers. In the evening, one of the fighters, Miguel, watches the news. The anchor reports that the governor has been called in for questioning regarding his involvement in embezzling funds allocated for healthcare. Miguel clenches his fists in anger. His daughter sleeps beside him on the couch. He carries her to bed. She wakes up, asks him to place her iPod nearby, and then inquires if he really arrested the criminal governor. The girl is proud of her father. In the morning, the governor is interrogated. He refuses to speak without his lawyer. Miguel reminds him that over $2 billion were diverted from healthcare. Doesn't the governor have anything to say? The governor claims that no errors were found in the reports, and that any healthcare issues are due to the incompetence of his predecessor. Miguel asks how the governor sleeps at night knowing he stole money and condemned many people to death. The governor smiles in response and tries to leave, but Miguel plays an audio recording of the governor ordering the cancellation of his arrest operation, bribing the Supreme Court, paying off necessary individuals, and even killing those who refuse to take the money. The governor's lawyer arrives. The chief sends Miguel and his colleague to rest, praising their excellent work. Miguel asks if the governor will get away with everything, but the evidence is too substantial. In the evening, Miguel dines at home with his daughter. Her mother arrives, thanking Miguel for taking care of their child and wanting to discuss a football match. Miguel says he and his daughter will watch it at home, but his ex-wife agrees to let them go to the stadium. In prison, the governor eats sushi brought by his lawyer. The governor asks if the public understands that he is innocent. The lawyer nods. The governor promises to start hunting down all his opponents as soon as he is free. The head of the special unit sends his fighters to assist in relocating several dozen families from a dangerous building, anticipating potential conflict. Miguel objects, saying it's not their area of expertise, but the chief interrupts him. The fighters head out on the mission, and Miguel's colleague says he managed without him, knowing Miguel planned to go to a football match. Thanking him, Miguel leaves. He is late to meet his daughter, but brings her a Brazilian national team jersey. They take photos and hurry to the match. Fans surround them. Fireworks go off. But suddenly a shot is fired, and the bullet hits the girl. Miguel rushes his daughter to the hospital, but there aren't enough doctors. The operation doesn't begin, and the girl dies. Her mother arrives at the hospital shortly after. They cry together. Meanwhile, despite all evidence and charges, the court releases the governor. Sometime later, Miguel's friend visits him at his apartment. Miguel is grieving. His friend says he checked everything, did all he could, but couldn't find out who shot the girl. The shot could have come from anyone, anywhere. Miguel believes it wasn't a random bullet that killed his daughter. At the hospital, they didn't even try to help. She died from simple blood loss. His friend suggests Miguel take a leave of absence. Miguel weeps, listening to music on his daughter's iPod. At a press conference, the governor claims he has nothing to fear because the nation's health has always been his priority. The plots against him only strengthen his resolve to continue his work. He assures that he won't let the people down, even when he becomes president. The statement triggers riots. Miguel watches the news report from the press conference, pausing during his jog in front of a store window. A stone flies into the window display. He joins the crowd of protesters, but as he approaches the police blockade, officers beat him. In response, someone from the protesters throws a Molotov cocktail at the police. Despite their retreat, a real clash ensues. Tear gas is deployed. Miguel coughs, but at that moment, a protective mask falls nearby. He puts it on and transforms into the Awakener. Thanks to his combat experience and skills, Miguel breaks through police lines and infiltrates the governor's residence, where he finds him hiding under a table. The governor tries to bribe him, assuming Miguel works for his political rivals, but it doesn't work. Miguel beats the man to death. Later, Miguel's colleague tries to identify the killer of the governor from surveillance footage, but fails. The police bring in detained protesters, and one participant notices Miguel and recognizes him. Miguel also looks at the girl and understands everything. Miguel's chief announces they will search for the masked person and those interested in the governor's death through him. They start with interrogating the detainees. Miguel volunteers to handle them and decides to start with a girl named Nina. He questions her and discovers she is a hacker but works at a comic book store. Nina's mother was convicted of fraud. They argue, but during the conversation, Nina writes on a piece of paper, "I saw you," and mentions that there's video evidence on her phone. She adds that a copy is stored in the cloud, so even if Miguel deletes the video from her phone, it won't help. Members of the governor's party discuss who they'll replace him with in the upcoming elections. They eat marble beef, laugh, and enjoy life. Party leader Antero Gomez suggests nominating his son, who has no criminal record, and threatens that any dissent will impact law enforcement, possibly sending party members to jail. Everyone agrees with the proposal. Miguel finds Nina's phone among the confiscated items, watches the recordings, and releases her. His colleague is surprised because this isn't protocol. Meanwhile, Nina goes to work where she searches for all available information about Miguel online. When she heads home, Miguel pulls up beside her in his car and offers to talk. But Nina refuses until Miguel blackmails her with the information on her phone. The police are searching for Nina as a hacker. Miguel tells Nina he just needs the names of others involved in the governor's criminal scheme. Nina hacks the governor's laptop, and Miguel obtains the necessary information. He sets up a hideout in an abandoned building and systematically eliminates corrupt officials one by one. The news reports specifically on this. Part of society supports the actions of the Awakener. The police chief is outraged that they still haven't caught the lone killer, and Miguel's colleague begins to suspect that the Awakener is a police officer. His work is just too clean. To eliminate the new target, Miguel plans to infiltrate a skyscraper where the minister will be. As he heads there, his colleague suddenly realizes who will be the next victim and urgently sends Miguel a message to come immediately. But Miguel doesn't notice the message. He's already making his way into the building. Nina coordinates his actions. Meanwhile, the minister meets with Antero Gomez, who offers her a bribe to halt the pursuit of politicians in the corruption crackdown operation. However, the minister refuses the money. At that moment, Miguel's colleague arrives at the scene. Nina tries to warn Miguel while simultaneously calling his colleague. This causes interference, and Miguel accidentally encounters his colleague in the corridor. A chase ensues through the building, resulting in Miguel being wounded. The minister survives. Miguel calls Nina and asks her to patch up his wound because he can't reach it himself. Then they discuss their next target, Antero Gomez. But he's very hard to approach. Miguel needs rest. The police chief also colludes with corrupt politicians and calls Antero Gomez the boss. Meanwhile, he's the only official left alive. The police chief realizes the Awakener isn't acting alone. He's aided by some hacker managing the surveillance cameras. Despite Miguel and his comrades uncovering new information about the schemes of the late governor, their superiors order them to halt the corruption investigation operation due to lack of evidence. This directive came from the minister. They must focus solely on the masked killer. Everyone is outraged. During a dinner party, Antero Gomez, surrounded by his new henchmen, discusses plans to nominate his son for the presidency. The young man nervously exits the room and later states he's not ready for such responsibility. Father and son have a conversation. Meanwhile, Miguel has Antero Gomez in his sights, but at the last moment, the young man unexpectedly embraces his father, and the bullet hits him instead. Despite his son's death, Antero Gomez decides to turn the situation to his advantage and run for president. Meanwhile, his associates trace the hacker's location who aided the Awakener and arrive at the comic book store. However, Nina isn't there, and instead, her colleague dies. After some time, Nina enters the store and rushes out in horror. They start monitoring her. Meanwhile, Miguel's ex-wife visits his colleague and complains that Miguel disappeared after their daughter's death. The colleague is surprised because Miguel claimed to have seen Nina several times. Nina leads Antero Gomez people straight to Miguel without realizing it. A shootout begins, and Miguel kills everyone except one. He takes Nina hostage, and the man offers a deal. The Awakener must kill Antero Gomez's rival during the debates, and then Nina will survive. When Miguel's colleague arrives at the abandoned building, he finds no one there. However, he discovers an iPod belonging to Miguel's deceased daughter. He calls Miguel's ex-wife in for questioning and confesses to her that the Awakener is likely Miguel himself. During the debates, Miguel plans to fulfill his part of the deal and kill Antero Gomez's rival, but his colleague interferes. They fight, and the colleague reveals he knows who is behind the Awakener mask. Miguel removes his gas mask, and they argue about the true calling of a police officer and who the real enemies of society are. The colleague says he won't let Miguel kill the man. A gunshot rings out. When the broadcast is interrupted, Nina manages to kill her captor and escape. Miguel is detained. In the interrogation room, his ex-wife confronts him, explaining that he has completely lost his mind, and their deceased daughter couldn't live knowing what her father had become. The Awakener's actions unexpectedly lead to very high voter turnout in the elections. Antero Gomez wins, and Miguel, who has been sitting in a cell all this time, is brought in for questioning. There, his former colleagues beat him, and the police chief states that Miguel didn't act all that badly. He just chose the wrong side, emphasizing that corruption is an integral part of the state structure. The police chief leaves, instructing his subordinates to finish things up. One of them shoots and kills his partner, then prepares to shoot Miguel, supposedly in self-defense. After a brief struggle, Miguel gains the upper hand, breaks free, and escapes, taking weapons and the Awakener mask. He sets out to kill Antero Gomez, destroying anyone in his path. Miguel reaches Antero Gomez. The politician talks to him, subtly loading his pistol, but Miguel shoots before he finishes speaking, then detonates the building with himself inside.